Okay, so now I've come to the end of whatever, say, required number of rows. I think it's 63 rows with a stitch count of 68 stitches. For this swatch, I've done a few rows here, right? So now if you can see this, as I said before, that this section remains straight, and this is where your increases start happening, right? And now you can clearly see the arrowheads lined up one above the other, right? So, and of course the mesh that's happening in the center, right? So of course when you block the piece, the mesh becomes bigger and you will be able to see it becomes a lot more lacier and lighter as well, right? So now you have to remember, when you end the first section in color A, you're going to be ending in a repeat of row 3, right? And when you come to the last 2 stitches, this is when you do not complete the 2 stitches with the same yarn. You will complete this two stitches with color B. So for that, what I usually do is I will just make a slip knot in the next color and insert and pull that through the last 2 stitches. I'm going to tighten it a little bit, right? And if you want to secure it, you can just tie a knot before you start working so that it doesn't come off. Right now you have your color B attached. So I'm going to start with row 64 repeat, which is your start for the smock stitch, which is your solid section of the shawl. Right now for the smock stitch, we'll be working in a different direction for yarning over, right? So there is another video which explains what is a normal yarn over and a yarn over purlwise. You can refer to that and you'll understand the difference between the two, right? So basically I'll just explain it again here. Basically a yarn over is, you take the hook, you insert it from the front to the back, right, where your yarn goes from the back and wraps and comes over to the front. This is your normal yarn over, right? Whereas a yarn over purlwise is basically where you take the hook and you go from the back and you lift the yarn from the front and it wraps to the back. So your wrapping is from front to the back. This is very critical for the smock stitch. So make sure that your yarn overs are correct in this section, because if your yarn overs are not correct, you will not get the effect that the smock stitch is supposed to create, right? So you yarn over purlwise. Now if you see the 64 row repeat, it says yarn over purlwise, and TSS 2 together, right? So you're going to see that you have, that's your 2 stitches, 2 vertical bars. I'm just going to go into them and do a normal yarn over and pull through both the stitches, right? Then yarn over purlwise again and TSS 2 together, right? You have to continue this. So the trick to yarn over purlwise is, the moment you yarn over purlwise, hold that yarn over with your finger, go into because if you don't hold, this will come off. It will easily come off, right? So hold the yarn over with your finger, go into the next 2 stitches, yarn over and pull up a loop, right? So keep continuing that till the end. If you see that I do not leave the yarn over at all, I'll hold the yarn over with my index finger. That's yarn over purlwise, Tunisian crochet, Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, yarn over purlwise, Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. Now I have reached the end of that row, so I'm going to yarn over purlwise. I've done that yarn over, and I'm going to do a Tunisian full stitch and go into that last, for the Tunisian last stitch, right? Now if you count the number of stitches on this row, it will always be 2 stitches more than the previous row. In all of these previous rows of the arrowhead stitch that we did, we were increasing only by 1 stitch. However, when we do the first row of the smock stitch, we'll be increasing by 2 stitches. That's because we do a yarn over initially and we do a Tunisian full stitch also at the end. So that increases 2 stitches together, right, for that entire row. So I'm just gonna do the return pass and I will meet you back at the start to show you how we're gonna work the row 65 repeat. So now we're going to start the row 65 repeat. Now it says skip the first stitch. So you have to remember that in Tunisian crochet you never work into the actual first stitch that you have, because this loop on your hook already corresponds to that stitch, so that is already done. So we do not consider that the next one becomes your first stitch. So skip the first stitch, which is the yarn over from the previous row, and Tunisian simple stitch into the next. So you can see this vertical bar, you do a Tunisian simple stitch into that. Then now you have the repeat, which is the same as the previous row, which is yarn over purlwise and Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. Now for the two stitches which has to be done 2 together, if you see, one is this vertical bar that you have this side, and the next one is the yarn over from the previous row, which is basically this particular loop. Now because you do the Tunisian simple stitch, it will get pulled up onto the other side. So what you need to do is you need to pull this stitch back, hold your yarn over and insert your hook below that and through that and the next stitch and yarn over 2 together. So Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, that's how, so that's, you see, that basically forms your 2 together and the V of the smock stitch. So let's do that again. Yarn over purlwise, hold your hook. Now because this loop is already pulled this side, you see once you pull this back, you will see that's your, this is your loop here. So we're gonna yarn over, hold the yarn over, insert your hook through that and the next stitch and pull 2 together, right? So continue doing that. Yarn over, Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, yarn over, Tunisian simple stitch 2 together. Now the one of the trick that helps in identifying and pulling the yarn is basically you hold this vertical top, your horizontal top, and just pull it back, right? Once you do that, you can see you get that space to put your hook below that stitch and continue working in it, right? So continue doing the repeat all the way till the end, till you have 2 stitches, till you have the last stitch left, right? Now don't forget your yarn over again. So yarn over and then we'll do the Tunisian full stitch and your Tunisian last stitch, right? And then return pass. Now once you do the row 64 where you've increased 2 stitches, the next stitch on the next row onwards, you'll go back to increasing only 1 stitch at a time, right? So it's only when you are switching from color A to color B and switching from the arrowhead stitch to the smock stitch is when you will increase only twice. Otherwise, everywhere on all the rows, you are increasing only 1 stitch at a time, right? So let me just complete this row, and I will see you at the end of this row. Now that I've finished the row, let's do the row 66 repeat. So this is basically exactly similar to row 64, except that there is no skip stitch that's happening, whereas here you're going to skip that first yarn, the TSS that you did from the previous row, and you're going to continue with yarn over and Tunisian simple stitch 2 together, right? So every alternate row you will have your Tunisian simple stitch that happens first, and the next row will have just directly the yarn over and the Tunisian 2 a TSS 2 together, right? So that's it, that's your repeat. You can keep continuing all the way till the end, right? And then you will have your yarn over and Tunisian full stitch and your last Tunisian stitch, right? So let me just quickly get through the last few stitches, and once we finish this, I'll show you how you don't forget your yarn over, your Tunisian full stitch, and your last Tunisian stitch, and then you start doing your Tunisian repeat, return pass. Once you're done, I'll explain to you why we have to yarn over purlwise for the smock stitch and what effect it creates, right? So once we're done, okay, that's your last stitch there, right? So now if you see, you can see these inverted V's that are happening. That is basically what your smock stitch texture is, that you will get these inverted V's, and it will create every alternate. So if you have the V here, the next one you will have it right on top. So when we do the TSS on one row and skip that stitch on the next row, what happens is we are alternating the V's, we're offsetting it by one stitch, and we're creating these V's kind of a texture, right? Now, because we do a yarn over purlwise, which is the yarn over in front, this loop that you see of the V is because of that yarn over which is on the other side. If you would have done a normal yarn over, this would have gone behind and we would have not got this texture. So now you know why the yarn over is very important. Yarn over purlwise is very important for the smock stitch, right? So now I've done 3 rows, and I'm going to skip, I'm going to change color, and I will start showing you how we're going to return back to this arrowhead stitch in the next section.